My cousin just defended her overweight son after he ate all my birthday cake before it was time to eat it. Reddit. Have you ever seen a parent defend someone over something outrageous? Story 1. I was in Walmart buying a frozen pizza for dinner a few weeks ago. There was this kid, about 6 or 7, in front of me screaming because he wanted a candy bar. This old man in a wheelchair behind me yelled, "You're singing out of pitch. Sing it right or shut up." It was my greatest moment in Walmart. Story 2. This is a quote from Dash. Now, I'm sure many of you encountered little creeps in supermarkets, little kids running about and knocking things over, being rude, walking all over their parents, you know the kind. But the worst are the biters. Yes, those little freaks that feel it is okay to bite you whenever they feel like it. Okay, here's the best part. The biter got me today when I was grocery shopping. He broke the freaking skin too. This was when the gear started turning, the moment I saw a tiny sprinkle of in the little creep's teeth as he was grinning at me like the little freak he is. I made my eyes get wide and started screaming, "Shoot! Shoot!" Now my good friend, Tom, we'll call him, was there too, and he instantly picked up on it. He started shouting, "Shoot! Maybe he didn't get it! Shoot!" By now, the kid is scared so much and starts crying, and instantly Miss Mom appears out of nowhere and starts getting pissy at us for yelling at her kid. Here's the kicker. I look her straight in the eye and say, "Ma'am, get your son tested as soon as possible. He just bit me and I'm freaking positive." And now there's silence, not a peep in the entire store. The brat knows he just messed up big time because his mom isn't defending himself. She just stares at me wide-eyed. I walk away from them and buy my stuff from the wide-eyed cashier, all the while blood dripping from my calf, making a nice little trail on the floor. And just as we leave, we start to hear the mother sobbing like the freak she is. I've never felt any more satisfaction than the moment I heard that sob. Story 3. I was working retail one day when a kid of about 6 to 9 years old came in with his mother. It was a pretty busy day, and we had associates everywhere trying to get work done. Well, this kid started picking up things off the shelves, looking at them briefly, and then proceeded to throw them over his shoulder and move on. And then had to approach them and ask if they needed any help finding something. The boy just grunted and kept moving on, throwing things off the shelf. At this point, I went to grab my manager on duty and told him to get him out of the store because it was going to be my responsibility to clean up the mess. When my manager approached the woman, she started yelling, "This is my freaking right, and his freaking right as citizens of this country to do what we please." We had to threaten to call security to get them to leave. Some people. Story 4. My uncle and his family live with my grandmother. His wife has an iPad that she lets her son use. He is 4. My grandmother also has an iPad, but mostly keeps it in her room. Recently, my cousin has been acting quite spoiled. The worst situation was when my uncle had friends over and my cousin went into my grandmother's room, took her iPad while she was sleeping, and damaged it quite a bit. My grandmother was obviously not very happy and told my cousin that he was not allowed to use her iPad again. However, my useless aunt got angry and started shouting at my grandmother, telling her that he was just a baby and that she needed to stop picking on him. Moreover, my cousin has also been known to hit her and break her things. My grandmother just takes it now. The worst part is that his parents don't correct him. Story 5. I went into a shop where a little kid was running around like crazy. I stood in line to ask the staff a question, and the boy ran up and kicked me as hard as he could. The mother told me, "It is because you're a stranger." I was appalled that she thought that absolved her child from being wrong. He's a stranger to me, and I never kicked him in the face back, did I? I forgot to add that on my niece's birthday, her brother decided to destroy the house because he wanted presents too, and it was unfair. His aunt, from the other side of the family, said that it was okay, she would take him to get his presents, and it was our fault for not including him. The woman never bought my niece anything, not even a sweet. Story 6. One day I forgot my lunch and had to work a 10-hour shift. Luckily, one of my managers is amazing, and she bought me a few cookies so that I could have a snack until my boyfriend could bring me my lunch. At the counter at work, we have a smaller counter that's a bit lower than the main counter, attached at the side. A man and his morbidly obese kid walked in, and I set my cookies down there until after I helped them. When I turned around to get the father's coffee, the kid was climbing on the counter and took one of my cookies. I had no idea what to say. When the father noticed, all he said was, "He has a learning disability." I was so shocked that I said, "Having an idiot for a parent isn't a disability." My manager insisted that he pay for me to have a new cookie, but he said, "No, my son has a learning disability. This is discrimination." I hope he and his porker of a kid drowned. Story 7. My friend, my brother, his friend, and I were once at our summer house. My friend and I were jumping on a trampoline and having a blast when my brother's friend comes along and picks up a rock, puts it in a slingshot, and shoots it right into my friend's left eye. He starts crying and we both go to my dad, who's talking to my brother's friend's mother. We tell her what happened and my brother and his friend are right beside us, still playing with a slingshot. His mother tells us how it wasn't his fault, that it was an accident, and that we were in the way of his slingshot, that it was our fault. She then proceeds to ask her son if he did it while still kind of defending him, and he says the most priceless thing I've ever heard. "Yeah, I shot her in the eye." His mom is quiet for a few seconds and then proceeds to tell us that he's joking. He's now a criminal. Story 8. When I was in junior high school, I was kind of a loser. I'd been fat and quiet throughout my childhood, and I had maybe 2 friends. The rest of my class bullied me pretty much nonstop. Suddenly, the puberty fair came, and I grew about 1.5 feet with pretty lovely boobs and a decent butt without gaining a pound overall. This guy I knew early on, he mocked me relentlessly. I tried to ignore him, but when he tried to pull my skirt one day in the halls, I had enough. I reported him to the teacher and the guidance counselor, and he got in minimal trouble. His mom came in to have a little talk with my mom in attendance. She said it was just a case of boys being boys, so he shouldn't be punished. And anyway, from what I've heard from my son's name, everyone's seen it already anyway. Unbelievable. Story 9. I worked as a private investigator for a few years and carried my gun all the time. One night, my cousin came to visit me with her 13-year-old son. More backstory. People within my family always consider me to be nice, strict, and fair. I'm also ex-military. So this little freak gets into my room, broke the lock, loads my gun, Walther P5, and tries to leave with it. I'm a freaking detective. I can tell he's acting funny. I ask him what is wrong. My cousin knows me well. She stops and stands in front of the door. This freak stick draws on me. S&W 44 Model 629. It's a much bigger gun. He drops the gun. His mother goes ape crazy. How can you point a gun at him? He wasn't going to shoot. You shouldn't have guns. She doesn't visit me anymore because I'm a dangerous man that shoots at children. Story 10. My sister and her family borrowed my car during a visit, and unfortunately, her kids ripped the fabric lining off the inside of one of the doors. To make matters worse, they received a ticket for parking in a red zone. This occurrence happens frequently because they believe that parenting is so difficult that it gives them the right to park in a red zone when loading or unloading their children. They returned the car, they failed to inform me of the ticket or damage to the car. I discovered the damaged door soon after and was quite upset that my sister didn't inform me or offer to fix it. But I let it go since they were just kids. Later, I received notice that the ticket had not been paid. I was confused until I realized that my sister and her family had received the ticket while driving my car. When I asked my sister about it, she explained that they didn't tell me because they planned to fight the ticket. The cop was unjust in giving them a ticket because their children weren't good in their car, and it was too difficult to have them walk a few blocks to where it was parked to load them in. I asked her to please pay it, and I informed her that neither she nor her children would be allowed to use my car again. Unfortunately, they never paid the ticket, and I ultimately paid it to avoid late fees and a warrant. On another occasion, my sister and her family were coming to visit, and to avoid any damage to my house, I suggested we meet at a restaurant. During the meal, one of her children sat next to me and proceeded to put me in a headlock so that I couldn't eat my food. Additionally, she stabbed me in the eye with both a straw and the corner of her menu. And whenever I tried to converse with my brother-in-law, she became upset and demanded that I pay attention only to her. The child even attempted to force-feed me meat, despite my explaining to her that I'm a vegetarian. Her parents made no attempt to control their children's behavior. Their other child talked excessively to the waitress, following her around the restaurant and making her job difficult. Despite being told to stop, she continued to do so. At the end of the meal, while my sister and her kids were in the bathroom, my brother-in-law stated, "It's so weird that they acted like that today. People always say that our kids are so well behaved." Having had enough, I responded, "No one says that." To his credit, he looked ashamed on the way out. I apologized profusely to the restaurant staff and left a $20 tip. Lastly, during another restaurant visit, my sister demanded that we receive happy hour prices, even though the happy hour pricing was only applicable for the bar. The manager gave us a discount to prevent a conflict. My sister then sent her food back twice for various reasons. When she finally received something acceptable, she gave me her baby and said, "Hold her so I can eat." Her older daughter decided that it was an excellent time to punch her younger sister and wound up hitting me in the stomach instead. I looked at my sister, who just watched the whole thing without saying anything. I asked her if she had anything to say to her daughter after the incident, to which she replied, "Oh, that isn't so bad. She punched her grandmother in the face last week." Story 11. This kid lived in my neighborhood. At the time, he was a lot older than me. I was like 11 and he was probably around 17. He and his parents were loaded. They lived in this huge house and the kid drove either a Porsche or a Lamborghini. The son was a bitch. He'd blast music insanely loud in his car, drove 80 friggin' miles an hour down our little street, almost hit me on my bike more than once, and then would laugh. He also ran my mother off the road 4 times. When she finally confronted him, he told her to get the hell away from me. You aren't my mother. Rolled his window up and sped off. When my dad found out, he was ticked. So me, my dad, and my mom drove down to their house to tell his parents. When we told them all about the incidents, what did they do? Thank us for being concerned parents and informing them before their son hurt or killed himself or others? No. The mom was upset at us. That was clear, but she didn't really object until the mess of a father walked out and told us to get the hell out of his property and mind our own freaking business. He also threatened to have us arrested and said, "There was nothing wrong with my son." My parents got pretty pissed and left, telling them just saying before we went home. Not 10 minutes later, what happened? The goddamn cops showed up. The cops came to our front door and let my father know that the dad of the kid called, saying we were threatening him and his son. My dad told his side of the story, and the cops agreed to let him off with a warning. The lengths some people will go to defend that their kids are perfect little angels are amazing. Story 12. My second cousin is a little son of a witch. He's about 7 years old, and his mother, my first cousin, has no control over him because of her lack of anything. One day, he's throwing his Wii games that were in the cases around my aunt's house. I tell him to stop. He throws one, and it hits another cousin in the face. She starts crying, so I go over to her and tell the little freak to stop throwing stuff. He flings another one in my direction, and when I get up to go after him, he takes off. I picked up a game case and ninja starred it right in the back of his knee. I guess I threw it hard enough at his frail 7-year-old body that it made his knee buckle, which in turn made him fall and slam face first into the door jamb. His mom comes running, accusing us of hurting him. I told her he tripped. My cousin, whom he hit, backed me up. Story 13. My parents have these friends who had a kid late in life. They let that kid run rampant. He curses, screams, kicks, bites, breaks stuff, etc. One evening, we were all sitting out in their backyard at a barbecue, and this kid dropped True on the porch steps and started to pee. "Bryce, goddammit, go further out for that." So the kid stopped midway, waddled further out into the yard with his pants around his ankles still, and finished. When my mom tried to say something about it, the kid's mom got up in arms and said, "What the hell are you expecting from him? He's only 5. Story 14. This one time, all his cousins were playing in the backyard having fun when one cousin, I'll call Sam, decided to grab a full-sized branch and smack another cousin, I'll call Alice, in the face with it, but she also ended up having to get stitches all over her face. His mother, one of my aunts, didn't even bother getting up to see if Alice was okay, even though she was the one watching us. And when she was confronted by Alice's mother, she merely replied, "Boys will be boys." Poor Alice carries the scars to this day. Story 15. Whenever we'd visit my sister's godparents in the suburbs, their kids and extended family would pick on me relentlessly. I would tell my parents, and they told my mom and dad, they're just playing around. One time, they all tied me to a tree and hit me with sticks. Another time, they had their dog chase me around, a German Shepherd the family trained as a guard dog. Eventually, my parents signed me up for Hapkido classes in the fall, and we visited a lot less. Summer started, and we were visiting weekly, which I hated, so I would always just sit near my parents and play my Game Boy or read. One time, I made the mistake of bringing my magic cards to build a deck while I was there. They took my cards while I was in the bathroom and ripped half the cards and set fire to the rest. I was furious at this point. One of the kids said, "What are you gonna do about it?" I didn't want to start a fight, so I said that I was going to tell his mom and dad. He got in my way and kept shoving me around. After the third shove to the ground, I had enough. So as he was going to hit me, I swung faster and hit him in the throat, then kicked him in the stomach. Some of his cousins tried to get me too, but I just had to hit them once and they started crying. Soon, their parents came up to see what the fuss was all about, and they started yelling at me for starting a fight. I tried to say they started it and pointed to the now ashy pile of magic cards. Still, more yelling. And they turned their attention to my parents and asked them what they were going to do about it. My mom and dad got mad at me for starting a fight, and we left while they were apologizing. As soon as we got in the car, my mom said, "Thank God you finally taught those little freaks a lesson." And we drove off. We stopped by the store on the way home so they could get me some new cards. Story 16. My cousin is about 9 years old and he refuses to eat anything healthy. He frequently eats things like Cap'n Crunch with chocolate milk and drinks Dr. Pepper for breakfast. He spends all of his time playing video games and never reads or plays outside. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong with playing video games, especially when you're having a chill day with a family out in the middle of nowhere in Texas. There's nothing better to do. But he will leave the room for hours on end and then come back and sob because we started watching a movie and turned his game off. He also wakes up at the crack of dawn and starts playing his games with the sound all the way up without any situational awareness. His parents just let him run around and be a screaming, crying menace, all the while expecting the rest of the family to accommodate his outrageous behavior and even help him get under control when they decide it's time to parent. It doesn't help that they justify his behavior by blaming it on his ADHD, for which he's heavily medicated, but hasn't gotten any better. They also defend his aversion to anything remotely healthy. Bad parenting is the worst, am I right? Story 17. When I was a preschool teacher for children aged 24 to 30 months, I had a rather unpleasant and juicy child. He was not terribly likable, which is pretty tragic when you're only 2. Anyway, our outside play area was covered in soft mulch to protect them if they fell, and they fell all the time. I bent down to retie child's shoe and almost instantly heard yelling. I looked over just in time to see him pulling his hand away from a little girl's face. He had stabbed her in the eye with a piece of mulch. It was totally unprovoked. He was not acting out. He just looked at the stick and thought, "Oh, I'll put that here." So we sent the girl to the ER with her parents and had a conference with his parents. Apparently, they allowed this child to bite, hit, scratch, tackle, punch, and otherwise attack his other family members, In fact, they encouraged it and congratulated and applauded him. His father and two older brothers, 11 and 13, thought it was fantastic. Their defense was, he isn't big enough to hurt anyone and he has so much fun. They thought teaching him to be a psycho was cute and funny. Listen, your toddler may not be large enough to be a threat to your teenagers, but he's more than capable of putting out the eye of another toddler. And he will grow in size but not in self-control if you don't start teaching him that random violence is socially unacceptable. Story 18. My aunt and her 3 kids were usually accidentally not told about family gatherings because she had zero control over the brats. If they ever came to visit, my sister and I would hide our favorite toys because they'd probably break them. They were the kind of kids who would start smashing a toy against a wall just to see if it would break. Of course it would. During one of my dad's birthday celebrations, we had set out a big buffet table with all kinds of nice food so people could eat, drink, and socialize in our garden. My cousins went over and took 1 or 2 bites out of damn near everything on the table. My mother was absolutely livid. She had to be restrained by her brother while my dad told my aunt and our kids to leave. All the while, she was laughing it off, saying, "They're just kids," and all the rest. Disgraceful. Story 19. Not defending terrible children so much as enabling them. From way back in high school, had the worst nephews I've ever seen. They both had BB guns. One time, the older one, I think he was 8, got mad over something, I don't remember what, maybe chores, so he shot out the side windows in his mom's car. She took his BB gun away as punishment, so he grabbed his 4-year-old brother's BB gun and shot some windows in the house. She wouldn't take that one away because it wouldn't be fair to his brother. He didn't do anything. But she did try to send him to his room. Then he said, "I'll kill you, you witch." She felt so bad for making him hate me that she just gave up on punishment and gave him ice cream. Story 20. When I was in 4th grade, a mean girl would always bully people into giving her their things, playing with her at recess, etc. She was never kind and would never take no for an answer. Both of her mothers were teachers there, so at times, I felt obligated to hang out with her, despite the fact that she was mean to my friends and me too. One day, I decided I'd had enough and told her to take a hike, the best way a 4th grader knew how. I told her we couldn't play together anymore until she felt like being nice, but until then, I wanted to be left alone. Not 2 hours later, I was being pulled out of class by her mother, another teacher, and the bully. Her mother stood over me for the next 20 minutes, scolding me for being unkind and bullying her daughter. All the while, the little witch stood in the background snickering at me. Story 21. My ex-sister-in-law defended her 13-year-old son after he punched a 2-year-old by saying, "He's got anger control issues. It's not his fault." But when the 2-year-old's mom got angry, she acted like the other mom was crazy.